Hi, it's industry story time because people say they like to hear industry stories. So I found this in the bunker the other day. Check it out. I've probably shown this before somewhere along the line, but anyway, I thought I'd tell you the story of this. What the hell is it? And how did it come to be? Because it's a rather interesting tale of a last minute design scramble for a trade show. So as you know, I used to work at Altium, so this is back in 2007. Now, we had already released the Altium NB2 Nanoboard back in early 2007, I believe it was, and I'm not sure how long it was for sale at the time, but anyway, that was sort of like the previous year's big release, you know. So it was a development board because Altium were getting into FPGAs. That was their vision, and it was a development board that had plug-in FPGAs. You could get all different vendor FPGAs, and then all these peripheral boards that you could plug on and do different things, you know, audio video interfaces, HDMI, GSM and IO and all sorts of stuff you could just plug in, had a little LCD on it and everything else. And it was actually a ridiculously expensive development board. Here's a press release from September 9th, 2008. So this is a year later when they decided to sell it via DigiKey. And they're at a price, bargain price of $4,300. Although it did actually come with like a stripped down version of Altium Design that allowed you to do all FPGAs and everything else. You got a license and all that sort of stuff. Famously turning the world of electronics design upside down, where the PCB module in Altium was optional extra. Yep, you bought the Nanoboard because that was Altium's vision, is that you wouldn't need to design your own boards. Why would you need to design your own boards? Because you could just use all these custom boards. This is the end of 2007. 2008's about to roll around, and the big conference in Silicon Valley was coming up, the big trade show, DesignCon 2008. And of course, Altium had to have the biggest and baddest stand there. And here it is, what it ultimately turned into, but we'll get into that. So they wanted something new to show off, and new concept, couldn't just show the nanoboard again. So they came up with the concept, I think probably Nick Martin, because he came up with all, he drove everything at the time, CEO of founder and CEO, and came up with the idea for the industrial nanoboard, where, like the NB2 nanoboard was like just a desktop development type thing. But of course, the vision was that you could buy all these off-the-shelf boards. You could develop it on your desktop version and then just plug them into this industrial version and just plug it on the wall. So the idea was that it would be more industrial-like, and here's a 3D model of it, and it had the same peripheral boards on here. So here we go, these peripheral boards, and it had the it's like a more industrial type LCD on it and stuff like that. And but it was fully compatible with the desktop, so you could take the modules off there, whack them in, and it had like a bit like a proper industrial enclosure with panels you could get cables in and out of, and grommets and all that, all that sort of jazz. It was powered from external power supplies, like industrial power supplies and stuff like that. And it was a decent idea. But the problem is that they came up with this idea in December 2007, and the DesignCon show, which they wanted to show this off at, was like the end of January, I think, or maybe like the 1st of February or something. But we had to get this done by, it was like, I don't know, early to mid December at this point, and we had basically a month and a bit to get this all not only designed from scratch, but actually then prototype manufactured, assembled enough that we could show off at the DesignCon booth. And who got stuck with the design of the PCB for this puppy? Not just one, but two different versions of it. And so this is what it turned out to be. But anyway, this was a very tight time frame to get all this done with Christmas in there as well. Christmas and New Year's, when, you know, a lot of companies shut down, you can't get parts delivered, and, you know, all sorts of issues. But anyway, so I started frantically working on the design of the this industrial nanoboard, and thankfully the Altium design system was really good, because we already had, like, you know, like a lot of the blocks, all the schematic blocks and parts blocks and everything else. So it came together rather quickly, but, you know, it was an entire design from scratch. And this is a this is what, an 8-layer jobby here. I won't go into too much detail, but anyway, I managed to get together this one plus another version, which was basically the same thing, but it was like a different form factor. They wanted to have multiple form factors. So 2 boards plus a display board and everything else that had to all come together before the trade show. So I can, oh, there's a bug. It doesn't like that, does it? Oops. So this is the industrial nanoboard design that I came up with in consultation with the mechanical engineer at the time, who was designing all the enclosures and case, and did all the, you know, 3D modeling stuff and things like that. So I remember vividly working on Christmas Eve, and in the Altium building there were only 2 people left, myself and Nick Martin, because Nick Martin was like always there. I think he lived there. And so I went, oh, bugger this, it's Christmas Eve. I'll go back home and I'll work remotely, because we had like a remote desktop interface. It was really difficult for the time to do, but I used Altium at home, but I could, you know, get the files and everything remotely. So I thought I'd go home, finish, and bugger off home, finish the design. And so it was like late at night on Christmas Eve, and I needed to order some parts so that we could have them from Farnell's or wherever, or DigiKey or whatever, so that we could have the parts, you know, straight away. And I had forgotten my company credit card. It was back at the office halfway across Sydney. So I thought, I wonder if Nick's still there. Nick will still be there. Sure enough, contact him. Yep, he's still there. He went to the, this is like, you know, midnight or something on Christmas Eve. It's just nuts. Anyway, so he goes over to my desk, reads me on my credit card numbers. Yay, we're saved. We're able to order the parts. So anyway, that was just nuts, like on Christmas Eve. Anyway, I think we just got the parts before Christmas, or early New Year's or something like that. Anyway, I was frantically finishing the design of these boards off, but then in like early to mid-January or something, we only got like a couple of weeks left. They're still designing the stands and everything else, and they got the idea for, you know, the slogan, seeing is believing, but touching is more fun. We had t-shirts with like all this, like with this fun on the back. I've probably still got a bunch of t-shirts somewhere at home. Anyway, we already had the NB2 desktop, which we could show off as well, and we had the industrial nanoboard, and here it is. Here was the final solution down here in the 2 different form factors, and you could join them together. It was really quite neat from a mechanical aspect and stuff like that. But then they said, oh, they wanted to show a 3rd step where you know, you could do your own custom boards if you wanted to. So Nick said, you know, Dave, give me a custom board, something that looks custom-y. And I went, well, what does that mean? Like, we've got no time left. Like, we've got like a day to do it or something like that. So I was scratching my head for a while, and like, I think I maybe came up with a couple of ideas, and he didn't like them and stuff like that. And then I go, no, well, like, we've just got to like take the existing design. Don't have time to design something brand new. And so I came up with the idea to take the existing design and just make it look funky. So instead of Altium black, we'll make it red. And I decided to make it curved like this, right? And then add these big like shock mounts on here, like anti-vibration mounts. And it was just like one of the most bullshit ideas ever. But it was like, you know, it looked kind of funky, and Nick loved it and said, yeah, let's go with that. So we had to, so I basically had the design. I just had to, you know, make it all funky and stuff like this. So I got this emergency rush assembled, like I'm talking like 24-hour protos, as we did with the other ones. 8-layer board, we got these turned in 24 hours. Don't ask the price. If you have to ask the price, you can't afford it to get a board like this spun in 24 hours. So we got these made, and they look really funky, but then we had to get them assembled. And of course, like there's 0402, you know, lots of 0402 parts on there and stuff like that. And there's, you know, 600, 700 pin, 670 something pin BGA, and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So we could have done it by hand, but we actually decided, like, we needed a bunch of these. We needed, like, you know, 6 of them or something, half a dozen or something like that. So we rushed assembly job, once again paying absolute top dollar, because when you either go to a PCB house to get something like this 24-hour prototyped, or whether or not you go to an assembler and say, hey, I need my boards assembled today. Start programming in the pick and place machine. I need this damn thing done. They'll go, sure, but we're going to charge you like 5 times the normal price or whatever it is, because they have to then bump all the other jobs, and, well, you know, the other customers aren't going to be happy, so they want to be compensated for that. So it costs a lot of money. Anyway, we got these assembled, and we got them back in like a couple of days. Like, it was nuts. The timeline was just absolutely insane on this thing. And what do you know? All of the parts on here, like the all of the like 0402s, where is it there? All the 0402s and stuff like that, they all tombstoned. All the chips, well, not all of them, but yeah, I probably was. They all flipped up like this because as part of the industrial look and feel, I went for a double thickness board, so a 3.2 millimeter board instead of your standard 1.8, and it's an 8-layer board. It's got all ground planes all in there, so this actually retains a ton of heat when you put it through the reflow oven. You know, you do the pick and place, and then it goes along the conveyor belt, goes into the multi-stage reflow oven, and solders the parts on. And I think they goofed it up or something, and they had the wrong temperature profile for it. Like it was for a 1.6 millimeter board, and this thing retained all the heat much higher. So even though the surface mount components on here had thermal relieves, and we can see that. So even though all the parts had thermal relieves on them, and as you can see here, right, they shouldn't have, you know, tombstone, right, because they're not directly connected to the ground plane. But because the board was so massive and had so much copper in it, retained so much heat, and they goofed the profile, and it didn't cool down at the correct rate, and then the one pad cools down quicker than the other one, and then whoop, it flips up. Anyway, screwed them all up, so there was a last-minute frantic effort to go and rework all these 0402 parts to get them back down. Anyway, we finally got this done. We got them assembled because they had to work. They wanted them on the stand to actually work, and ta-da! There's the final product working down there, and it was like a GSM. Was it a GSM app? No, that one was just displaying a slideshow. But we needed it to actually do stuff, whereas the one up here had like a GSM module down in here, and you could like SMS a thing, and it would pop up. You know, it would pop up on the screen and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was the you know, the stand that they wanted to have, and we needed to set up multiple ones of this. But it wasn't over yet, of course. It was, once again, a frantic last-minute effort to not only get all these designed, assembled, the software tested, the software written, the apps, you know, tested and all that sort of stuff. And then the design people were working on these display boards and things like that for the stand, and, you know, how all that was going to go together. And the cases, these industrial type cases here, we didn't have like the injection molding cases yet. These were just like prototypes. So I think they were all hand finished out of fiberglass. They were all like hand done. Oh, we didn't, like some shop did it or something. So all these hand done, they were really fragile apparently. These hand done fiberglass shells and everything, and like I think if you breathed on them they would break or something like that. But we had to have something to show off at the DesignCon show, because it was the big show of the year, you know. And it was, there's a lot of company prestige, and there's a lot of press around it, and, things like that. So we got these fiberglass shells assembled. So they were extremely fragile, and we had to get them, I don't know where they were, we had them made, but we had to get them shipped to Altium's headquarters at that time in Carlsbad, down near San Diego in California. And so we got them all rush shipped there. So we had to all fly over there with our tested boards and everything else, but we had to fit them inside these cases and everything. And I don't think they were painted or something. They weren't painted and they weren't sanded down or something. So at the Altium HQ over there at Carlsbad, we had to sand them all down and finish and make them all look nice and ready for the show, install the boards and stuff like that. But as it turns out, they were too fragile to just throw in a crate and just ship them there, because these companies are notoriously bad at handling this sort of stuff. So we had to get, and we had dozens and dozens of these. They were and lots, and that we had to carefully pack into boxes, so the boxes were big with all the bubble wrap, and there's no way we could get all this stuff on a plane or anything like that. So we thought, right, we'll hire a van. So we hired a van, stuffed it all full of full to the brim with all these boxes of all the trade show stuff, and myself and the mechanical engineer went, right, we have to get, there's a day left or something, and we've got to drive up to from basically San Diego up to Silicon Valley at the one convention center, wherever it was, the San Jose Convention Center, was it? And so we took a road trip up the it was quite a nice road trip, actually. Thanks for asking. And anyway, we managed to get there on time, and but it wasn't over yet. We had to get all this sort of stuff assembled, tested on the trade show stand. And if you've ever done a trade show stand, it never is ever done early. So the doors were open 10 a.m. or something, and 5 minutes to 10, we're under the benches, wiring stuff up, still screwing things together and going, hope it all works. We power it all up, and we're still doing that as people are walking onto the stand. But we got it done. So there you go. That was there it is, the custom nanoboard. And here's and there you go. There's Nick and former CEO at the time, Emma LaRusso. Yeah, that's another story. She didn't agree with the company vision. Let's just put it that way. And, it was fun. People were, there's, just a random person playing with the board. And, it was one of the demos that we had up because it looks funky on the screen, and the 3D modeling. Back in 2008, 2007, 2008, the 3D modeling thing was, really innovative and novel and stuff like that. So we had trying to flog our $4,000 development board and these industrial enclosures, as you saw. And there's someone, I forget who that is, but just in the middle of setting up the stand. Or was that packing up? I'm not sure. Anyway, we managed to get it done at the last minute. So it was frantic, and I worked all over Christmas and New Year, and just absolutely flat out. I think I took half of Christmas Day off with the family. That was frantic. And yeah, I managed to get all the 2 different industrial designs done, plus this shock. It was called the shock. It's, the NB2 shock version, and it was complete wankery, right? But we just needed something that looked custom, and everyone thought it was great. So, and yeah, the anti-vibration feet. I thought that was a great idea. Blank PCB. Whatever. It worked, and it wasn't much, it's an hour's design effort to actually design that when you already have the rest of it. It's not hard at all. But yeah, all that had to come together. 3 different designs, and there was 3 or 4 different boards plus enclosure design and everything else in it was probably a month. It was a month and a half tops. Absolutely crazy. But we managed to get it together, and it all worked on the display stand, and everyone was happy. But whatever happened to the industrial version, well, I don't quite remember, but I'm not sure if we actually took any orders for it, but it just, I don't know, somehow just the concept died away. And I don't think we ever actually sold the industrial version. It was actually kind of neat, but once again, it was ridiculously expensive, just like the NB2 Nanoboard, which was like $4,000. And when we eventually tried to sell it at DigiKey, even when we halved the price to like $2,000, it's still the world's most expensive development board, and it didn't sell diddly squat, as was much discussed in the community, the Altium design community at the time and stuff like that. Eventually did come out with the NB3000, which was like a $300 development board, and that one actually sold in reasonable numbers. Oh, that was part of the turning the world of electronics design upside down, when they made the PCB design module optional extra, I think. Anyway, so there you go. That is the history of this doodad, this funky little but it really worked, and it was on the trade show. It was one of those last minute scramble things. And if you ever get invited to be on a trade show stand, don't do it. Don't do it. It's soul destroying, I think. When on a trade show stand, you'll just be buggered by the end of it. By the way, I forgot to mention, during all of this, while I was staying at the Hilton in Carlsbad in California, near Altium HQ there, like the first day, I got food poisoning. It was the worst food poisoning I've ever had in my entire life. So the rest of the 2-week trip, or however long it was, I basically ate nothing. And when I got back, everyone just looked at me and went, "What the hell happened to you?" And it's like, yeah, I almost didn't eat a thing for 2 weeks. It was awful. So yeah, that wasn't a pleasant trip after, you know, a frantic month of designing all this sort of stuff. And these trade show stories, they're often always the same. I always have the belief that engineers do their absolute best when they have a real hard deadline. Like, you have to do it. That trade show's happening. We've booked the stand where all the stuff is, you know, designed. We need the desktop. We need the industrial version working. We need this custom version working. It's all done, and it has to be done. And engineers just magically get it done on time. It's amazing when you have a really strict deadline. And it's just, you know, even though we had hiccups in assembly, and we had software hiccups, and I think the software was still being tweaked at like the last minute. Even on the trade show stand, it was still being tweaked and bugs being worked out, and, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So, but it gets done, and it's amazing what you can do when you have a deadline. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that story. If you please did, give it a thumbs up. And if you've got a frantic last minute design story like that, leave it in the comments or over on the EEVblog forum. Catch you next time.